I thought I was just catching a regular taxi home from work that night, but when the driver turned around, locked the doors, and told me I looked exactly like his murdered daughter, I realized I might not make it out alive. My name is Luna Hayes, and I'm 28 years old. I work as a marketing coordinator at a busy firm in downtown Boston, which means I'm used to working late nights and catching rides home when the subway stops running. I've always been the independent type, the kind of person who walks confidently down dark streets and doesn't jump at shadows. But I'm not reckless either. My younger brother Kai taught me to trust my instincts and always let someone know where I am. I've lived in Boston for 6 years now, ever since I graduated college and landed my first real job. I love this city, even with its unpredictable weather and expensive rent. I know which neighborhoods to avoid after midnight, which drivers to trust, and which shortcuts to take when I'm running late. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I was safe. That Thursday night in October changed everything I believed about safety, about strangers, and about the thin line between fear and compassion. What started as a routine ride home from another exhausting 12-hour workday turned into the most terrifying and unexpectedly moving experience of my life. I had no idea that getting into that yellow taxi would force me to confront not just my own mortality, but the devastating power of grief and the lengths a broken father would go to find answers about his lost daughter. I had no idea that by the end of that night, I would understand something profound about human pain and the courage it takes to choose empathy over fear. The man behind the wheel wasn't who I thought he was. The danger I sensed wasn't what I imagined, and the choice I had to make in that locked car would stay with me forever. This is the story of how a 20-minute taxi ride taught me that sometimes the most frightening moments in our lives can also be the most important ones, and how a grieving stranger helped me understand that bravery isn't just about protecting yourself, but about seeing the humanity in someone who scares you. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday in October, and I was finally shutting down my laptop after another brutal 12-hour day at Sterling & Associates Marketing. The office building felt like a ghost town at this hour, with only the hum of cleaning crews vacuuming the floors above me and the occasional security guard making his rounds. The fluorescent lights cast that harsh, tired glow that makes everything look slightly depressing after dark. I gathered my things slowly, my shoulders aching from hunching over spreadsheets and campaign proposals all day. My coffee cup had been empty for hours, but I kept sipping from it anyway, a nervous habit I'd developed during stressful projects. This week had been particularly intense because we were launching a major campaign for a tech startup, and every detail had to be perfect. As I walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Kai. "Get home safe, sis. Call when you're inside." My little brother was only 2 years younger than me, but he'd appointed himself as my unofficial bodyguard ever since I moved to Boston. He worked in IT for a software company and had flexible hours, which meant he was usually awake when I got home from these late nights. I smiled and typed back, "Heading out now. Love you." The October air hit me like a cold slap when I stepped outside. It had been raining earlier, and the streets were still slick and shiny under the streetlights. I pulled my coat tighter and checked my phone for an Uber. My usual driver, Felix, was offline, probably already done for the night. I scrolled through other available drivers, but the wait times were all over 15 minutes. My phone battery was down to 15%, and I was exhausted. The financial district at this hour always made me slightly uneasy. During the day, it buzzed with energy from business people rushing between meetings, street vendors selling coffee and hot dogs, and tourists taking photos of the historic buildings. But at night, especially on a weekday, it felt hollow and echoing. The tall office buildings loomed overhead like sleeping giants, most of their windows dark except for the occasional cleaning crew or security light. I stood there for a few minutes debating whether to wait for an Uber or walk to the nearest T station. The subway would require a transfer and a 10-minute walk from the final stop to my apartment in Cambridge, and I was wearing heels that were already making my feet ache. Plus, my phone battery was dying, and I needed it to last until I got home. That's when I saw the yellow taxi cruising slowly down the street, almost like it was looking for a fare. I raised my hand without really thinking about it. Traditional taxis weren't my first choice anymore since rideshare apps became popular, but I'd taken plenty of them over the years without any problems. Boston taxi drivers were usually chatty and harmless, full of stories about the city and complaints about traffic. The cab pulled up immediately, which struck me as lucky. The driver was a heavy-set man who looked to be in his early 50s with graying hair and kind but tired eyes. He had the worn look of someone who'd been driving nights for years, probably supporting a family and dealing with all kinds of passengers. When I slid into the back seat, he glanced at me in the rearview mirror and smiled. "Where to tonight?" he asked, his voice friendly and warm. "Cambridge, please? Near Harvard Square?" I gave him my exact address and settled back into the seat, grateful to be out of the cold and on my way home. "Long day at work?" he asked as we pulled away from the curb. "The longest," I replied, checking my phone one more time. Still no messages from Kai, which was good since it meant he wasn't worried yet. The driver made pleasant small talk about the weather and the late-night traffic patterns as we drove through the nearly empty streets. I found myself relaxing for the first time all day. The cab was warm and clean, and the driver seemed genuinely nice, the kind of person who probably had grandchildren and told the same jokes to every passenger. I answered his questions politely while responding to a few work emails on my phone. The city looked different at this hour, quieter and more mysterious. We passed a few bars with people spilling out onto the sidewalks, their laughter echoing off the buildings. A group of college students waited at a bus stop, probably heading back to their dorms after studying late at the library. Everything felt normal and safe. I had no reason to suspect that this ordinary taxi ride would become anything other than a routine trip home. I had no way of knowing that the friendly driver making small talk about the weather was about to change my life forever. About 15 minutes into the ride, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten with unease. The driver kept looking at me in the rearview mirror, not the occasional glance that drivers usually make to check on their passengers, but long, intense stares that lasted several seconds at a time. At first, I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, or maybe just my exhaustion making me paranoid after such a long day. I pretended to focus on my phone, scrolling through emails I'd already read, but I could feel his eyes on me constantly. Every time I looked up, there he was, studying my face in the mirror with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't threatening exactly, but it was deeply unsettling. My pulse started to quicken, and I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. "You know," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the engine, "you look exactly like my daughter." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt that familiar chill you get when a conversation takes an unexpected turn. I forced myself to respond politely, the way I'd been taught to handle awkward social situations. "Oh, what a coincidence. How old is she?" The driver was quiet for a long moment, long enough that I started to wonder if he'd heard my question. Then his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, so quiet I had to lean forward to hear him clearly. "She was killed 10 years ago, right here in this city. We never found her body." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. The casual, friendly atmosphere in the cab evaporated instantly, replaced by something heavy and dark that made it hard to breathe. I glanced at the door handle beside me and noticed with growing alarm that the locks were engaged. The little button was pushed down, and when I discreetly tested the handle, it wouldn't budge. I tried to keep my voice steady and compassionate, even though every instinct was screaming at me to get out of this car. "I'm so sorry for your loss. That must be incredibly difficult to live with." But instead of acknowledging my sympathy, the driver started behaving more erratically. He missed the turn he should have taken toward my neighborhood, continuing straight instead. When I realized we'd passed my street, I spoke up as calmly as I could manage. "Excuse me, I think you missed my turn back there. My apartment is in the other direction." "Just want to show you something first," he replied, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "Something about my daughter, Vera." The fear that had been building in my chest exploded into full panic. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands, pretending to text but actually opening my emergency contacts. The driver continued talking, his voice becoming more animated and urgent. "Vera was 22 when it happened. Just graduated from Boston University with a marketing degree, just like you mentioned earlier. She had the same height as you, same dark hair, same way of holding her head when she listened to people talk, even the same smile." I realized with horror that he'd been studying me this entire time, cataloging similarities between me and his dead daughter. The taxi continued moving away from my neighborhood, heading toward the warehouse district near the harbor. The streets were getting darker and more isolated with each passing block. She was so smart, so full of life, he continued, his eyes meeting mine again in the mirror. She had just started her first job at a marketing firm downtown. Sound familiar? She used to work late nights just like you, catching rides home when the subway stopped running. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone steady. I tried to think of what Kai had taught me about staying calm in dangerous situations. Don't panic, he'd said. Keep thinking clearly and look for opportunities. The police gave up on her case after 2 years. The driver went on, his voice becoming bitter. They said there wasn't enough evidence, no leads to follow. But a father never gives up. A father keeps looking, keeps hoping, keeps driving these streets every single night. We were now in a part of the city I didn't recognize, surrounded by empty lots and closed businesses. The few streetlights cast long shadows that seemed to reach toward our car, like grasping fingers. I could hear the distant sound of water lapping against the docks, which meant we were getting close to the harbor. Where are we going? I asked, proud that my voice didn't shake, even though I felt like I might throw up from fear. Somewhere special, he replied. Somewhere that might help you understand what happened to Vera. You look so much like her that maybe, just maybe, you can help me figure out what her last moments were like. The locks on the doors seemed to click even more firmly into place, and I knew I was running out of time to act. My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening. This wasn't just a strange conversation anymore. This was a potential kidnapping, and I was trapped in a moving vehicle with a man who seemed to be living in some kind of grief-induced delusion. Every survival instinct Kai had drilled into me during our self-defense sessions came flooding back. Stay calm, assess your options, and act decisively when you see an opening. I forced myself to take slow, steady breaths while my brain worked frantically to form a plan. The driver was completely focused on his monologue about Vera, which meant he wasn't paying full attention to what I was doing with my phone. I had to use this to my advantage. Remembering something Kai had taught me about creating evidence trails, I opened my voice memo app and hit record. Then I spoke loudly and clearly, making sure every word would be captured and heard by the driver. Hey Kai, I'm in taxi number 4, B7G, and I'm running late because the driver wants to show me something about his daughter Vera who was killed 10 years ago. We're heading toward the warehouse district instead of my apartment on Maple Street. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The driver's head snapped around to look at me directly, his eyes wide with alarm and anger. What are you doing? Why are you recording this? Stop that right now. But I didn't stop. Instead, I continued speaking into my phone with as much authority as I could muster, drawing on every acting class I'd taken in college to sell the lie I was about to tell. My brother is a police officer with the Boston PD, and he's tracking my location through my phone's GPS. If you don't take me directly home right now, he's going to assume I'm in immediate danger and dispatch units to find this taxi. This was completely untrue. Kai worked in IT and had no connection to law enforcement, and my phone's GPS wasn't being actively monitored by anyone. But the driver didn't know that, and I could see the uncertainty creeping into his expression. I don't want to hurt you, he said, his voice becoming defensive and panicked. I just need you to understand about Vera. I need someone to help me make sense of what happened to her. Then unlock these doors and drive me home, I replied firmly. If you really don't want to hurt me, prove it by letting me leave. Instead of complying, the driver pressed harder on the accelerator. We were approaching a red light at a major intersection, and I knew this might be my only chance to escape. I quietly unbuckled my seatbelt, positioning myself to grab the door handle the moment the car came to a complete stop. I continued recording, speaking even louder now so that anyone listening to this later would have all the crucial information. The driver is a white male, approximately 50 to 55 years old, gray hair, wearing a dark blue jacket. The taxi license number is 4B7G, and we're currently at the intersection of Harbor Street and Industrial Avenue, heading toward the waterfront. Stop giving out that information, the driver shouted, his composure completely shattered now. You don't understand what you're doing. You look exactly like her. This has to mean something. The light turned red, and I felt the car beginning to slow down. This was it. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I kept my voice steady as I continued the recording. If something happens to me, Investigate a man who drives taxi 4B7G. His daughter Vera was killed 10 years ago, and he's been driving around looking for someone who resembles her. He's taken me to the warehouse district against my will. As soon as the taxi came to a complete stop, I lunged for the door handle and pulled as hard as I could, but the electronic locks held firm. The door wouldn't budge. Panic flooded through me as I realized my escape plan had failed. The driver turned around in his seat to face me fully, and I could see tears streaming down his face. His expression wasn't angry or threatening, but rather desperate and broken in a way that was almost more frightening than outright hostility. "Please," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I'm not going to hurt you. I swear on Vera's memory that I won't lay a finger on you. I just need 5 minutes. 5 minutes to show you where we found her backpack, where someone last saw her alive. You look so much like her that maybe if you see it, you can help me understand what she was thinking, what she was feeling in those final moments." The light turned green, but he didn't move the car forward. Other drivers began honking behind us, but he seemed oblivious to everything, except my face and his own desperate need for answers about his daughter's death. The honking behind us grew louder and more insistent, but the driver made no move to accelerate through the green light. Instead, he sat there with tears streaming down his face, staring at me with an expression of such raw desperation that something inside me shifted. This wasn't the face of a predator or a killer. This was the face of a man drowning in 10 years of unanswered questions and unprocessed grief. "Please move the car," I said, my voice softer now but still firm. "You're blocking traffic, and if a police officer comes to investigate, this situation is going to get much worse for both of us." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and slowly pressed the gas pedal, moving us through the intersection. But instead of continuing toward the waterfront, he pulled into an empty parking lot beside a closed diner. The sudden silence when he turned off the engine was deafening. "My name is Nolan Rivers," he said, turning to face me completely. "I've been driving this taxi for 12 years, ever since I lost my job at the shipyard. I have 3 other children who are alive and healthy, and I love them more than life itself. But Vera was my firstborn, my little girl who wanted to change the world with her marketing campaigns." I kept my phone recording, but I found myself actually listening to his words instead of just waiting for an opportunity to escape. There was something in his voice that spoke to a pain so deep and fundamental that it transcended the fear I'd been feeling. Every night for 10 years, I've driven through this city, hoping to find someone who might have seen her, might have known her, might be able to tell me something the police missed. When I saw you tonight, when you mentioned marketing and working late downtown, it was like seeing a ghost, like Vera had been sent back to help me find peace. "But I'm not Vera," I said gently, surprising myself with the compassion creeping into my voice. "I'm Luna Hayes, and I'm 28 years old, and I have my own life and my own family who love me. Taking me somewhere against my will isn't going to bring Vera back or give you the answers you're looking for." Nolan's shoulders began to shake with silent sobs. "I know you're not her. In my logical mind, I know that. But when I look at you, I see her so clearly that it physically hurts. I see the daughter who used to call me every day after work to tell me about her projects and her dreams. I see the girl who was supposed to get married and give me grandchildren and live a long, happy life." I felt my own eyes filling with tears, not from fear anymore, but from witnessing such profound human suffering. This man wasn't a monster. He was a father whose world had been shattered and who had spent a decade trying to put the pieces back together without success. "Vera wouldn't want this," I said quietly. "She wouldn't want you to spend your life driving around in pain, scaring innocent people because you can't let go of your grief. She would want you to find a way to honor her memory that doesn't involve frightening women who remind you of her." "How do you know what she would want?" he asked, his voice breaking completely. "How can you possibly understand what it's like to lose a child and never know what happened to them? To wonder every single day if she suffered, if she called out for me, if she died thinking I had abandoned her?" The raw agony in his voice hit me like a physical blow. I thought about my own father, how he would feel if something happened to me or Kai. I thought about the text my brother had sent earlier, asking me to call when I got home safely, and how that simple gesture represented a love so deep that losing it would be unbearable. "You're right," I admitted. "I can't understand that kind of pain, but I do understand that what you're doing isn't helping you heal, and it isn't honoring Vera's memory. It's keeping you trapped in the worst moment of your life, and it's preventing you from being the father your other children still need." Nolan was quiet for a long time, staring out the windshield at the empty parking lot. Finally, he reached over and unlocked the doors. The click of the locks disengaging was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "I'm going to drive you home now," he said, his voice barely audible. "And then I'm going to go home to my wife and tell her what I did tonight. I'm going to get help, real help, because you're right. Vera would be ashamed of the man I've become." He started the engine and began driving toward my neighborhood, this time taking the most direct route possible. The drive to my apartment took exactly 18 minutes, and we spent most of it in contemplative silence. Nolan kept his word, taking the most direct route possible, while I sat in the backseat processing everything that had just happened. The fear was finally leaving my body, replaced by an odd mixture of exhaustion, relief, and something I hadn't expected to feel toward this man who had terrified me so completely just an hour earlier. Genuine compassion. When we pulled up in front of my building, Nolan turned around one last time. His eyes were red from crying, but there was something different in his expression now. The desperate, haunted look had been replaced by what seemed like the first glimpse of clarity he'd experienced in years. "Luna," he said, using my name for the first time that night, "I need you to know that I'm deeply sorry for what I put you through. There's no excuse for my behavior, regardless of my grief. You showed me more kindness and understanding than I deserved, and I'll never forget that." I could have simply gotten out of the car and never thought about Nolan Rivers again. Part of me wanted to do exactly that, to chalk this up as a terrifying experience I'd survived and move on with my life. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of my own family's struggle with grief when my grandfather passed away, or maybe it was just the recognition that healing requires community, even for strangers. I pulled out my phone and found the contact information for Harbor Light Grief Counseling, the support group that had helped my family navigate our loss 3 years earlier. I wrote down the number on a piece of paper from my purse and handed it to him. "This is a grief counseling center that specializes in helping families who have lost children," I told him. "They have support groups that meet twice a week, and they also offer individual therapy. My family used their services when we lost someone important to us, and they truly understand the kind of pain you're carrying." Nolan took the paper with shaking hands, staring at it like it was some kind of lifeline. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know if I'm ready, but thank you for giving me somewhere to start." I got out of the taxi and watched as he drove away into the night. Then I called Kai, as I'd promised I would, and told him I was home safe. I didn't tell him what had happened that night. I wasn't ready to put that experience into words yet, and I knew he would have insisted on calling the police immediately. Instead, I spent the next few hours sitting by my window, looking out at the city lights and thinking about grief, fear, compassion, and the strange ways that human connections can form even in the most unlikely circumstances. I thought about Vera Rivers, a young woman I'd never met but whose memory had brought her father and me together in the most unexpected way. 2 weeks later, I received a text message from an unknown number. "This is Nolan. I wanted you to know that I've been attending the grief counseling sessions you recommended. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the first time in 10 years that I've felt like I might actually be able to heal. I also wanted to thank you for seeing my pain instead of just my fear. Vera would have liked you very much." Attached to the message was a photograph of a beautiful young woman with dark hair and a radiant smile, standing in front of what looked like a college graduation backdrop. She was wearing a cap and gown and holding a diploma, her face glowing with pride and excitement for the future that was tragically cut short. That text message changed something fundamental in how I viewed my own life and relationships. I realized that I'd been so focused on protecting myself from potential dangers that I'd forgotten how to see the humanity in people who scared me. Nolan had taught me that sometimes the most frightening situations arise not from malicious intent, but from pain so deep that it distorts everything around it. I started volunteering at Harbor Light Grief Counseling Center on weekends, helping facilitate support groups for parents who had lost children. It became one of the most meaningful parts of my life, and it connected me with people whose strength and resilience constantly amazed me. 6 months later, I visited Vera's memorial garden that Nolan had created in a small park near Boston University. It was a beautiful space, filled with her favorite flowers and a bench where people could sit and remember her. I left white roses there and spent some time thinking about how a terrifying night had led to an unexpected friendship and helped a grieving father begin his journey toward healing. That night taught me that courage isn't just about protecting yourself from danger. Sometimes it's about choosing to see the person behind the threat and responding with compassion instead of just fear. If this story moved you, please share it with others who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about your own experiences with unexpected human connections, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about finding hope in difficult circumstances.